I'm sorry, Daddy, Susan said softly, sensing her father's disappointment. I just wanted you to be happy. David smiled at his daughter, his heart swelling with love for her. I know, sweetheart, he said, and I appreciate that more than you know. But right now, all I need is you. In a bustling city called Lagos, there lived a man named David. David was a kind and hardworking man who spent his days working at a big company in the heart of the city. He had a smile that could brighten even the gloomiest of days, and a heart full of love just waiting to be shared. One sunny day, while David was busy at work, he met a beautiful woman named Bella. Bella had sparkling eyes that shone like diamonds and a laugh that sounded like music. David and Bella quickly became friends, and before long, they realized that they were meant to be together. One evening, under the glow of the moon and the twinkle of the stars, David got down on one knee and asked Bella to marry him. Bella's eyes filled with tears of joy as she said yes, and they sealed their love with a kiss. Soon after, David and Bella got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by their friends and family. It was a day filled with laughter, love, and promises for the future. Not long after their wedding, David and Bella received the most wonderful news of all. They were going to have a baby. They were overjoyed at the thought of becoming parents and eagerly awaited the arrival of their little bundle of joy. Months passed, and finally, the day arrived when Bella went into labor. David held her hand tightly as they rushed to the hospital, his heart filled with excitement and nervousness. After what felt like an eternity, they heard the sweet sound of their baby's cries filling the air. "She is here," the doctor exclaimed, placing a tiny squirming bundle into Bella's arms. David's eyes filled with tears as he looked down at his newborn daughter, Susan. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. From that moment on, David and Bella's lives were forever changed. They spent their days doting on their precious daughter, showering her with love and care. Susan became the center of their world, filling their home with laughter and joy. As Susan grew, so did their love for her. They watched in amazement as she took her first steps, said her first words, and explored the world around her with curiosity and wonder. Through it all, David and Bella stood by each other's side, facing life's challenges together with courage and determination. Their love only grew stronger with each passing day, a testament to the bond they shared as husband and wife, and as parents to their beloved daughter, Susan. Life was full of joy and laughter in David and Bella's home as they watched their daughter Susan grow and flourish. But one day, tragedy struck, changing everything in an instant. David worked hard at his job in the big company in Lagos. Just like always, he was a dedicated worker, always doing his best to provide for his family. But one day, something terrible happened. A colleague of David's, a man named Mr. Johnson, did something very wrong. He made a mistake at work and needed someone to blame. Instead of taking responsibilities for his actions, he decided to blame David. David did it, Mr. Johnson exclaimed, pointing his finger at David. He's the one who messed up. David was shocked. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had always been a loyal and honest employee, and now he was being accused of something he didn't do. The boss listened to Mr. Johnson and, without even giving David a chance to explain, decided to fire him. David's heart sank as he packed up his things and left the company for the last time. When David came home and told Bella what had happened, she couldn't believe it either. She was angry and upset, not just because David had lost his job, but because of what it meant for their family. "We will be okay, Bella," David reassured her, trying to stay strong. "I will find another job, I promise." But finding another job wasn't as easy as David thought it would be. Days turned into weeks and still he couldn't find work. The bills started piling up and soon the family was struggling to make ends meet. Bella's attitude towards David began to change. She grew distant and cold, blaming him for their financial troubles. "It's your fault we are in this mess," she would say, her voice filled with anger and frustration. "If you had just been more careful at work, none of this would have happened." David tried his best to explain that he had done nothing wrong, but Bella wouldn't listen. Their once happy home was now filled with tension and argument. Susan could see that something was wrong. She could see the sadness in her parents' eyes and hear the raised voices coming from their room at night. "Daddy, why is mommy so mad?" Susan asked one day, her eyes filled with confusion. David sighed and put Susan into his arms. "Mommy is just upset right now, sweetheart," he said softly, "but we'll get through this together, I promise." And they did. Despite the hardships they faced, David never gave up hope. He continued to search for work, determined to provide for his family no matter what. But little did David know, the worst was yet to come. As the days passed and their financial situation grew more dire, Bella's resentment towards him only grew stronger, and soon it would lead to a decision that would change their lives forever. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the tension in David and Bella's home continued to grow. Despite David's best efforts to find work and provide for his family, their financial situation only seemed to worsen. Bella's resentment towards him festered, fueling her growing frustration and anger. One evening, after another argument about money, Bella stormed out of the house, leaving David and Susan behind. David watched helplessly as she walked away, his heart heavy with sorrow and worry. "Where is mommy going, Daddy?" Susan asked, her eyes wide with confusion. David tried to hide his sadness as he put on a brave smile for his daughter. "Mommy just needs some time to herself, sweetheart," he explained gently, "but don't worry, she'll be back soon." But Bella didn't come back that night, or the next, or the one after that. Days turned into weeks and still there was no sign of her. David was beside himself with worry, unsure of where Bella could be or why she had left them. Then one day, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to David. With trembling hands, he tore it open and read the words inside. It was from Bella. David's heart sank as he read Bella's words. She explained that she had met someone else, someone who could provide for her in a way that David couldn't. She said that she was leaving him and Susan and that they shouldn't bother looking for her. Tears filled David's eyes as he realized what had happened. Bella had betrayed him, abandoning their family in their time of need. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal wash over him as he crumbled the letter in his hands. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Susan asked, seeing her father's distress. David wiped away his tears and put on a brave face for his daughter. "Mommy had to go away for a little while, sweetheart," he said softly, "but don't worry, We'll be okay. Daddy will take care of you, I promise. But David's promise was a heavy burden to bear. With Bella gone, he was left to care for Susan all on his own. He had to find a way to provide for her, to keep a roof over her head and food on the table, all while dealing with the pain of Bella's betrayal. Despite the challenges he faced, David never gave up hope. He worked tirelessly, taking on odd jobs and doing whatever he could to make ends meet. He was determined to give Susan the best life possible, even if it meant sacrificing his own happiness. And through it all, Susan remained by his side, a constant source of love and support. She may have been young, but she understood the pain her father was going through, and she did her best to help him however she could. Together, David and Susan faced the challenges lay ahead, determined to overcome them and build a bright future for themselves. And though Bella's betrayal had left a scar on their hearts, it also strengthened their bond, reminding them of the power of love and resilience in the face of adversity. With Bella gone, David faced the daunting task of raising Susan all on his own. But despite the challenges ahead, he was determined to do whatever it took to give his daughter the love and care she deserved. Daddy, where is mommy? Susan asked one day, her eyes filled with curiosity. David's heart clenched at the mention of Bella, but he forced a smile for his daughter's sake. Mommy is gone away for a little while, sweetheart. He explained gently, but don't worry, Daddy is here, and I will always take care of you. And take care of her, he did. David worked tirelessly, taking on any job he could find to make ends meet. From sun up to sundown, he worked hard to provide for Susan, putting her needs above his own. Despite the long hours and exhaustion that weighed heavily on him, David never for once complained. He knew that Susan was depending on him and he refused to let her down. One day, after weeks of searching, David finally managed to secure a modest job at a nearby factory. It wasn't much, but it was enough to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads. Daddy got a job, Susan exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. David smiled proudly at his daughter. That's right, sweetheart, he said. Now we can buy all the ice cream you want. Susan giggled and threw her arms around her father, her heart filled with love and gratitude for the man who had sacrificed so much for her. With his newfound job in hand, David enrolled Susan in a nearby school, eager to give her the education she deserved. Every morning, he walked her to school, his hand clasped tightly in hers as they made their way down the familiar streets. At school, Susan thrived, making friends and excelling in her studies. David watched with pride as his daughter grew and blossomed before his eyes, her laughter filling their home with joy and warmth. But even as Susan flourished, David couldn't shake the sadness that lingered in his heart. He missed Bella more than words could say, and he couldn't help but wonder what had driven her to leave them behind. Daddy, why did mommy go away? Susan asked one day, her voice filled with sadness. David sighed and pulled his daughter into his arms. I don't know, sweetheart, he said softly. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that we don't understand. But no matter what, you and I will always be together, okay? Susan nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Okay, Daddy, she whispered. And together, David and Susan faced each day with courage and determination, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they knew that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. As the years passed, Susan grew from a curious little girl into a bright and spirited teenager. She had her father's kind heart and gentle spirit, and she remained devoted to him. just as he was to her. Daddy, why don't you ever go out on dates? Susan asked one day, her brow furrowed with concern. David chuckled and ruffled his daughter's hair affectionately. I'm too busy taking care of you, sweetheart. He replied, besides, I don't need anyone else when I have you. But Susan wasn't convinced. She wanted her father to be happy, and she couldn't understand why he seemed content to be alone. You deserve to be happy too, Daddy, Susan insisted. Maybe if you went out and met some nice ladies, you wouldn't be so sad all the time. David smiled at her daughter's concern, touched by her thoughtfulness. I appreciate that, sweetheart, he said, but I am happy just being with you. You are all that I need. But Susan wasn't ready to give up just yet. Determined to see her father smile again, she took it upon herself to play matchmaker, setting him up on blind dates with some of her friends' mothers. Daddy, I want you to meet someone, Susan announced one day, dragging David to a nearby cafe where he was supposed to meet one of her friends' mothers. David sighed, feeling a bit apprehensive about the whole thing, but he went along with it for Susan's sake. As they sat down on a table, Susan pointed out a woman sitting across the room. That's Miss Joanne, she whispered excitedly. She's really nice, Daddy, I promise. David smiled politely at Miss Joanne, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Bella and the pain her departure had caused. He wasn't sure he was ready to move on just yet, no matter how much Susan wanted him to. As the evening wore on, David found himself lost in thought, barely paying attention to the conversation happening around him. Miss Joanne seemed nice enough, but she wasn't Bella, and David couldn't shake the feeling of sadness that lingered in his heart. When the evening finally came to an end, David thanked Miss Joanne for her company and promised to call her again soon. But as he and Susan walked home together, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the night was over. I'm sorry, Daddy, Susan said softly, sensing her father's disappointment. I just wanted you to be happy. David smiled at his daughter, his heart swelling with love for her. I know, sweetheart, he said, and I appreciate that more than you know. But right now, all I need is you. And so, despite Susan's best efforts, David remained devoted to his daughter, finding comfort and solace in her presence. Little did they know, their bond would soon be put to the test in ways they could never have imagined. Years had passed since Bella left David and Susan behind, and yet, despite all her efforts, she couldn't shake the emptiness that lingered in her heart. She had everything she could ever want: a luxurious home, expensive cars, and a rich husband. But none of it could fill the void left by the daughter she had abandoned. My love, it's been 16 years and still no child of our own, Bella's husband, Mr. Williams, asked one evening, his brow furrowed with concern. Bella sighed, her heart heavy with sadness. I don't know, Williams, she replied softly. We have been trying for so long, but nothing seems to work. Mr. Williams wrapped his arms around Bella, pulling her close. Don't worry, my love, he said soothingly. We'll figure it out together. But Bella couldn't shake the feeling of despair that gnawed at her heart. She had always dreamed of having a family of her own, but now it seemed like her dream would never come true. Then one day, a thought occurred to Bella. Maybe she didn't need to have a baby of her own. Maybe she could reconnect with Susan, the daughter she had left behind, and make her love her instead. Bella, what's on your mind? Mr. Williams asked, noticing the troubled look on his wife's face. Bella hesitated, unsure of how to voice her thoughts. I think we should try to reconnect with Susan, she said finally. Maybe, if she comes to live with us, it will fill the void in our lives. Mr. Williams frowned, unsure of what to make of Bella's suggestion. But Bella, Susan has her own life now. He pointed out gently. She has David, her father. I'm not sure she would want to come live with us. But Bella was determined. She had made up her mind and nothing was going to stand in her way. She began making plans, reaching out to old contacts and friends in hopes of finding Susan and convincing her to come live with them. Daddy, I got a message from someone named Bella. Susan said one day, her brow furrowed with confusion. David had skipped a bit at the mention of Bella's name. He hadn't heard from her since the day she left, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face her again. What does she want, sweetheart? David asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Susan shrugged, scrolling through the message on her phone. She wants to meet up, she said. She says she has something important to tell me. David's heart sank as he realized what Bella was up to. He knew she was trying to manipulate Susan to turn her against him and make her love her instead. Susan, I don't think you should go, David said gently, his voice filled with concern. I don't trust this Bella, and I don't want her to hurt you. But Susan was determined. She wanted to know what Bella had to say. I will be careful, Daddy, Susan promised, her eyes shining with determination. I'll be very careful, I promise. And so, despite David's misgivings, Susan agreed to meet with Bella, unaware of the danger that lurked ahead. Little did she know, Bella's plan were far more sinister than she could ever imagined. Susan sat nervously in her school courtyard, waiting for Bella to arrive. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her stomach, but she pushed it aside, determined to hear what Bella had to say. Finally, Bella appeared, her elegant figure cutting through the crowd of students like a knife through butter. Susan's heart skipped a beat at the sight of her, memories of their time together flooding back in a rush of emotion. Mommy, Susan said, her voice trembling slightly. What did you want to talk to me about? Bella smiled warmly at Susan, her eyes shining with false sincerity. Susan, darling, I have missed you so much, she said, pulling Susan into a tight embrace. Susan hesitated for a moment before returning the hug, unsure of how to feel. She had missed Bella too, despite everything that had happened between them. I have missed you too, Mommy, Susan replied softly. But why did you leave us? Why did you leave Daddy? Bella's smile faltered slightly, and she pulled away from Susan, her expression turning somber. Oh, Susan, sweetheart, I didn't want to leave you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But your father, he wasn't who you think he is. Susan's brow furrowed with confusion. What do you mean, Mommy? Daddy's always been there for me. He's never done anything to hurt me. Bella shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Susan, you don't understand, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Your father, he's not the man you think he is. He's abusive, Susan. He's been hurting me for years. I had to run for my life, and he seized you from me. Susan's heart pounded in her chest as Bella's words sank in. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her father abusive? It didn't seem possible. But that can't be true, Mommy, Susan said, her voice trembling with disbelief. Daddy would never hurt anyone. He loves me. He loves us. Bella shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. I know it's hard to believe, Susan, but it's the truth, she insisted. Your father has been lying to you, manipulating you. He's not the man you think he is. Susan's mind raced as she tried to make sense of Bella's words. Could it be true? Could her father really be capable of such cruelty? But why are you telling me this now, Mommy? Susan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Bella reached out and took Susan's hand in hers, her touch gentle and reassuring. Because I love you, Susan, she said softly, and I want to protect you from him. I want to take you away from all this, away from the pain and the suffering. I want to give you the life you deserve. Susan's heart ached at Bella's words. Part of her wanted to believe her, to trust that Bella had her best interest at heart. But another part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that Bella wasn't being completely honest with her. I I don't know what to do, mommy, Susan said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Bella squeezed Susan's hand reassuringly, her eyes filled with determination. Just trust me, Susan, she said. Trust me, I will take care of everything, I promise. And with those words, Bella's deception was set in motion, her manipulative skin threatening to tear Susan and David apart forever. But little did Susan know, the truth was far from complicated than she could ever imagine. The weight of Bella's words hung heavy in Susan's heart as she left the school courtyard, her mind swelling with confusion and doubt. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that Bella's accusation against her father were too far-fetched to be true. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of her mind, whispering that maybe, just maybe, there was some truth to what Bella had said. And Susan walked home. Her thoughts consumed her. Her heart torn between loyalty to her father and the desire to believe her mother's words. When she finally arrived home, she found David waiting for her, his eyes filled with worry. Susan, where have you been? David asked, his voice tinged with concern. I've been trying to call you all afternoon. Susan hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to tell David about her conversation with Bella, to ask him if what she had said was true. But the words caught in her throat, and all she could do was stand there in silence. Susan, please, David pleaded, reaching out to her. Talk to me. What's wrong? Tears filled Susan's eyes as she looked up at her father, her heart breaking at the thought of what she was about to do. Daddy, Mommy told me something today, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. David's brow furrowed with concern as he listened to Susan's words. What did she tell you, sweetheart? He asked gently. Susan took a deep breath, stealing herself from what she was about to say. She told me that you have been lying to me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She said that you are abusive, daddy. David's heart sank at the mention of Bella's accusations. He had hoped that Susan wouldn't believe her, that she would see through her lies and manipulation. But now, faced with the truth of Bella's words, he felt a sense of despair wash over him. Oh, Susan, sweetheart, that's not true, David insisted, his voice filled with emotion. I have never hurt anyone, especially not your mother. I love you both more than anything in this world. But Susan's mind was made up. She had had enough from Bella to believe that her father was guilty, and nothing he said could convince her otherwise. I don't know what to believe anymore, Daddy, Susan said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I need some time to think. And with those words, Susan turned and walked away, leaving David standing alone in the hallway, his heart heavy with sorrow and regret. In the days that followed, Susan distanced herself from David, refusing to take his calls or spend time with him. She threw herself into her studies, seeking solace in the familiar routine of school and the distractions it provided. Meanwhile, Bella wasted no time in capitalizing on Susan's vulnerability, showering her with gifts and attention in an attempt to win her over. She painted herself the victim, the long-suffering mother who had been wronged by her abusive husband. And Susan fell for her lies hook, line and sinker. Daddy, I'm going to stay at mommy's house tonight, Susan announced one evening, her voice cold and distant. David's heart clenched at the mention of Bella's name. You don't have to go, sweetheart. Bella is manipulating you. But Susan didn't seem to hear him. She turned and walked out of the door, leaving David standing alone in the empty room, his heart heavy with each step she took away from him. And so, as Susan fell deeper under Bella's spell, David was left to wonder if he would ever be able to reach his daughter again, or if she was lost to him forever. Little did he know the truth was far more complicated than he could ever imagine, and the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns he never saw coming. The school holiday arrived, and Susan found herself packing her belongings to spend the break at her mommy's luxurious house. Despite her lingering doubt about her mother's intentions, Susan couldn't resist the allure of the extravagant lifestyle Bella offered. As Susan settled into her new surroundings, Bella broached the subject of their future plans. "Susan, darling, I have some exciting news," Bella exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Susan looked up from her book, curiosity piqued. "What is it, mommy?" she asked, her heart pounding with anticipation. Bella smiled warmly at Susan, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "We are moving to London, Susan," she said. "You will continue your studies there at a prestigious school, and we will have a fresh start." Susan's heart skipped a beat at the mention of London. It was a dream she had always harbored, but now that it was within reach, she couldn't help but feel conflicted. She couldn't imagine leaving her father behind, the man who had sacrificed so much for her sake. But, but what about daddy? Susan asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I can't just leave him all by himself." Bella's smile faltered slightly, and she reached out to take Susan's hand in hers. "Oh, Susan, darling, your father will be fine," she insisted. "He's a strong man, and he will understand that this is what is best for you." But Susan wasn't convinced. She knew that leaving her father behind would break his heart, and she couldn't bear the thought of causing him pain. I I don't know, mommy," Susan said softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I need some time to think about it." But Bella couldn't take no for an answer, determined to have her way. She seized Susan's phones and locked her inside the house, refusing to let her leave until she agreed to go to London with them. Alone and frightened, Susan felt a sense of panic rising within her. Now she knows that Bella only returned because they couldn't have a child, and that her father was innocent of all the accusations. She knew she had to escape, to find a way back to her father before it was too late. Meanwhile, David grew increasingly worried about Susan's well-being. He had tried calling her countless times, but each time, his calls went unanswered. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and he knew he had to take action before it was too late. With a heavy heart, David made his way to the police station, determined to file a report of kidnapping against Bella and her husband. He knew it was a drastic step, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing while his daughter was in danger. The police wasted no time in launching an investigation, and soon they arrived at Bella's house to confront her and her husband. But when they entered the house, they found Bella and her husband trying to escape with Susan, whom they had already drugged in an attempt to silence her. The police arrested Bella and her husband on the spot, charging them with kidnapping and child endangerment. Susan was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment, her father by her side every step of the way. As Susan regained consciousness, she looked up at her father, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "I should have listened to you." David put Susan into his arms, holding her tight. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "You are safe now, and that's all that matters." After the traumatic event of Susan's abduction, David and Susan clung to each other, finding solace in their love and strength. Despite the pain and betrayal they had endured, they knew that forgiveness was the only way forward. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," Susan whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to her father. "I should have never doubted you." David held Susan close, his heart overflowing with love and forgiveness. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said softly. "We are together now, and that's all that matters." With their bond stronger than ever, David and Susan forged ahead, determined to put the past behind them and embrace the future with open arms. They leaned on each other for support, finding comfort in the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the years that followed, Susan graduated from university with top honors, her determination and resilience shining brightly for all to see. She landed a job at a prestigious company, her hard work and dedication paying off in ways she had never imagined. Daddy, guess what? Susan exclaimed one day, bursting into their tiny apartment with a grin on her face. David looked up from his newspaper, a smile spreading across his face at the sight of his daughter's joy. What is it, sweetheart? He asked, his eyes twinkling with pride. I got a promotion, Susan exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. They are sending me abroad to work at our company headquarters. Can you believe it? David's heart swelled with pride at Susan's accomplishment. I knew you could do it, sweetheart, he said, his voice filled with love and admiration. I'm so proud of you. But as Susan's departure date drew near, David couldn't shake the feeling of sadness that lingered in his heart. He knew that Susan's new job was an incredible opportunity, but the thought of being separated from her filled him with a sense of emptiness he couldn't bear. Daddy, I don't want to leave you, Susan confessed one evening, tears glistening in her eyes. But this is an opportunity of a lifetime, and I can't pass it up. David reached out and took Susan's hand in his heart heavy with sorrow. I know, sweetheart, he said softly, and I want you to go and chase your dreams. I will always be here for you, no matter where you are. And so, with a heavy heart, David watched as Susan boarded the plane, her eyes shining with excitement as she embarked on a new chapter of her life. He knew that she was destined for greatness, and he couldn't wait to see all that she would accomplish. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and Susan returned home, her arms open wide as she embraced her father with a smile on her face. Daddy, I have missed you so much, she exclaimed, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. David held Susan close, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. I have missed you too, sweetheart, he said. Welcome home. But Susan had a surprise for her father, one that would change both of their lives forever. Daddy, I want you to come with me, she said, her eyes shining with determination. I want to give you a better life, just like you have always given me. David's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Susan's offer. He had never dreamed of leaving their home behind, but the thought of starting fresh in a new place with his daughter by his side filled him with a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Do you mean it, sweetheart? David asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Susan nodded, her eyes shining with determination. I mean it, Daddy, she said firmly. I want us to be together always. And so, hand in hand, father and daughter embarked on a new adventure, leaving their old life behind and embracing the unknown with open hearts and open minds. And as they journeyed into the future together, they knew that no matter where life took them, they would face it together as a family bound by love and unwavering devotion. This story teaches us the importance of patience and love within a family. Bella's lack of patience led her to abandon her husband and daughter when they faced difficulties. Susan's hasty belief in her mother's words almost tore their family apart. It reminds us to cherish our family members and support them through thick and thin, rather than jumping into conclusions or giving up on them too quickly. Love and patience can strengthen family bonds and help overcome any challenges that come our way. Thanks for watching this amazing story about David and his family on African Stories. If you liked it and felt inspired with their journey, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.